Hello, guys. Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. My name is Mark. You're joining us again live, and I'm with Jon and with Myles today. Myles, I can't see you, mate. Looks like Myles is joining us later. We're back with some action from the Premier League. Thank God the Premier League is back. It's been a bit of a cracker of a weekend from Premier League action. Great for the internationals. Oh, there he is. How you doing, Myles? You're right.
Yeah, don't have enough, so.
Yeah, we are back with Premier League football, which it's been missed, let's face it. International is always a bit exciting, but it's nice to see the Premier League back in action. And we've got some absolutely thumping games to go through as well. Obviously, you've all seen Chelsea 2, West Brom 5. That was fun for the neutral. Leeds beat Sheffield United 2-1. Leicester lost to leaders Man City 2-0. Liverpool beat Arsenal 3-0, which is going to have a lot of talking points on its own, I think, isn't it? And then today we've had some decent games as well. Villa beat Fulham 3-1. Newcastle 2, Spurs 2, and then Southampton 3, Burnley 2. I think United are kicked off just now against Burnley, Brighton. Call myself a United fan. So plenty to pick through there. We're also going to talk about the news of Sergio Aguero moving on from Man City after a decade at the club. A lot to go through there. Probably talk through where he ranks in the top Premier League strikers of all time. And also the news of Erling Haaland being tarted around Europe by his agent. I don't know about you, but I find that kind of thing quite unsavoury. But we'll talk about that more a bit later. But first of all, I'll start with you, Jon. Any standouts for you from the Premier League from the weekend? It was nice to see it back. But as a Hammers fan, are you focusing solely on the West Ham performance, or what else has caught your eye this weekend?
I mean, West Ham are in action tomorrow night, and they've had some quite favourable results over the weekend. The Spurs game, Harry Kane bagging a brace, but then Newcastle coming from 2-1 down to draw, so that's a great result. The Chelsea game, as you said, is pretty mad. I mean, I thought with Allardyce being out for a few years that he would potentially come back and be able to wave his magic wand and save a team for relegation again, but it's certainly not been an easy ride for him so far. The result yesterday is something that no one really would have predicted. I'm sure that you might have seen the things on social media where a couple of people have put down a fiver at 200 to 1 and won £1,000 on a 5-2 result, which is probably after a few too many cocktails or whatever. But it's an interesting game to kind of talk around. The Chelsea one, losing Thiago Silva, getting sent off and then conceding 2 goals in injury time. So whether you want to talk about someone losing a leader, and if that has, quite clearly had quite a bit of impact on that game.
I think Thiago Silva going off changed everything, really, didn't it? He was back after a big absence, wasn't he, as well? So he probably went in all guns blazing with a point to prove, I'm back. This is my defensive berth. I deserve to be here. But, I mean, they didn't seem to have a plan B once he went off the pitch. And then Tuchel's had a really good run since he's been in charge of Chelsea. But, Jon, why do you think Chelsea capitulated as much as they did? Because they've got quality on that pitch.
Yeah, well, you sort of already hit the nail on the head. They massively capitulated, no plan B, losing the leader like Thiago Silva. They just didn't react at all. It just seemed to be, a pin in the balloon. As soon as that happened, it was game over, really, for them. I know that the psychology we spoke about when we'd done the dry run of the podcast before, that conceding a goal before half-time, I think we were loosely talking about the West Ham-Arsenal game. When West Ham scored an own goal to make it 3-1 just before half-time, and they end up drawing 3-0 against Arsenal. It's the same kind of thing again. So whether it is a genuine, football psychology that everyone's spoken about for so many years, that it's just a thing, or players believe that it's a thing when it's not, because at the end of the day, it's a goal. It doesn't matter when it's scored. Losing a leader was obviously massive, but like you said, he's not played for a long time.
The way they folded just made West Brom look like a class apart. They look like a different team.
Yeah, it was very strange.
It was in part down to, I think, the way they could smell blood and they could see that there were goals in the game. But, I mean, the spaces that were left between Chelsea's defence and midfield, Jorginho just wasn't up to the task of filling the void. And for me, I'm surprised, I really am, because I had Chelsea down as a top 4 cert. I thought they were on a run that wouldn't be stopped. I certainly didn't expect West Brom to stop it, that's for sure. What did you make of the game, Myles?
I wouldn't write them off. for top four off that result. I think they relied heavily on rotation. They've got a lot coming with the Champions League still to play for them as well. I think Tuchel will put a lot of stock into that. If you look, there, two centre-backs that have done them so well over that 14-game unbeaten run didn't start the game in Christensen and Rudiger, who I really rate Rudiger, actually. I think he's a really good player. And Silva, like you say, I think he just came back a bit too up for it. If you remember, his debut was West Brom, and that game was chaotic, and he didn't really seem to know how to deal with the physicality of that one either. He didn't have a good game at all. So I think leaving Rudiger and Christensen out was a big call. Mount didn't play either, and he's been obviously very influential for Chelsea this season, and actually done very well under Tuchel as well. But let's be honest, it was a big unbeaten run. It was a good implementation when he first came in. It's a hiccup. I can't imagine they'll now go on this downward spiral. These results happen when a team's fighting for their lives at the bottom, and West Brom looked like they actually did fight yesterday for a change. It can happen, can't it? It's a disappointing result, but when you go down to 10 men, I think the more worrying thing is the reports of what's happened afterwards. There's talk of a massive bust-up in the dressing room afterwards. Comments by Aspilicueta weren't received well, and then I think Kepa and I think it might have been Rudiger have clashed. And that's something that's been said to follow Tuchel wherever he's gone, that harmony being kind of dissolved quite quickly. Dortmund and PSG, supposedly, there was a few of these incidents. That would worry me more than the game, personally.
It strikes me as quite an intense manager. You know, it's like he's got a way of playing, and I imagine his training sessions are quite full on. So after a result like the one that happened the other day, it's no surprise that some of the players were kind of losing it a little bit with each other. I'm sure they're all looking at themselves right now and going, what the hell went wrong? And pointing some fingers. But I guess that's healthy for a dressing room to react to a defeat like that in that kind of way, in some ways.
It is. But when I saw that one of them was Kepa, who wasn't playing in the game, then you wonder where that's coming from. Kepa and Rudiger, neither of them played that match. So why are they clashing over the result? That to me, it was more worrying. And because Tuchel's got previous of little disputes in his teams, that would worry me slightly.
Yeah, it's a strange one. What's your insight into it, John? What's your opinion of the way Chelsea folded? Is that having an impact on their top four place now? And do you think they can get back to some kind of form?
I mean, everyone's got to lose at some point. I mean, you look at the Arsenal season, the Invincible season, when they should have lost quite a few games, ended up drawing and pulling it out in the 90th minute with an equaliser or whatever. And they played not to lose towards the end of that season as well. Everyone at some point will lose. It's football, isn't it? You know, you can get a dodgy decision, even with VAR, as we've seen over the last 18 months or so. But yeah, in terms of top four, I think they're in a very healthy position. Looking at the competition realistically, Liverpool, I believe, have got an easy run-in than a lot of the other teams. Are not really playing a lot of the big guns in their last sort of 8 or 9 games. You got someone like West Ham up there as well. You know, I'm a West Ham fan, but you know, will they? They're looking at the mentality of let's play it a game at a time and trying to do it, but they've never been up there, so there's a lot more pressure for them. Your Liverpools, Chelsea's, Leicester, they've been up there for a number of years now. Man United, they're a lot more seasoned. So I think that when it comes to the crunch, if it gets to the final game, and that's got a bit more of an impact, you might see West Ham doing it as a cup final, being too fired up, having someone sent off potentially like Silva was yesterday. Or it could go the other way, that, you know, you got a bit of complacency in the big teams thinking they're going to do the business, and for whatever reason it doesn't happen. But going back to your original point, I don't feel that one loss is going to impact it. It depends how they react. And in terms of the mentality in the dressing room, don't mind people showing a bit of passion. You know, if they are kicking off a little bit, losing against West Brom, conceding 5 goals at home, I'd be annoyed if that was me. And even if people haven't been playing, not too much of a big deal. But as Myles has said quite rightly, there has been a history of it. If you look at maybe 4 games' time, they lose again, and there's a little bit more unrest, that could be, you know, scratching a bit of a scab and potentially become quite a big issue, like it has done previously.
And not just with Tuchel as well. How many times have we seen the Chelsea dressing room turn, and all of a sudden players have control over who's in charge, and the dynamic there does translate to the pitch.
Yeah, that's true. I think it begs the question now. I'll start with you again, John, as well. What does your top four makeup look like? Because obviously Man City will probably win the league and walk the league comfortably. I imagine United will finish second or third between them and Leicester, really, isn't it? But fourth place, who's that going to now? Because looking at the table, it looks like Everton have got a couple of games in hand. They could creep up quite happily in there. I don't know who they've got in the fixture list, but they look pretty solid. What are you guys' thoughts? John, I'll start with you. Oh, it's two John.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It's introduced me again.
There he is.
There we go. Thank you for the quick fix. So, yeah, in terms of the top four, what does it look like? I missed the second half of the question, so you might have to repeat it in a sec. But I think it will be familiar faces. Man City, as you said, I mean, they've got an unassailable lead. It doesn't matter if they lose. Most of their remaining fixtures are going to get a couple of wins comfortably. So, you know, the title's in the bag for them. Second place is between United and Leicester, quite clearly. Yeah. So I guess, are they still to play each other as well or not?
I don't think so. I think they've played each other twice now. United.
No, okay, that's interesting then. I thought they still might have had a game. As they have already played each other for the two games, I guess it just depends on their run-in, which I'd need to look at in more detail. But at the end of the day, they're both a few points ahead of Chelsea, West Ham, Liverpool in the places below them. So it's at the point where it's theirs to lose. A lot of people are saying West Ham might win tomorrow. Wolves away, tough game. If, in fairness, if West Ham do win tomorrow, that will show a little bit of steel, a little bit of determination, and maybe they really are in the hunt. If they don't get some form of result tomorrow, I think that you've got to be looking at potentially counting them out, and they'll be looking at more Europa League, in fairness, just because of the strength, depth and quality of the teams around them.
As a Hammers fan, would you be happy with a Europa League place? Would that be a successful season?
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere. I mean, don't get me wrong, Europa League isn't going to be attracting like Aguero or anything like that, but at least it's then a stepping stone for other things. You've seen Chelsea do it over the last 5.
We've lost John again, I'm afraid. I'll have to jump into you, Myles, then. Have you got an opinion on sort of top four? Top three seems pretty set, but third place and fourth place, are you decided who's going to finish there?
I think top three, like you say, will stay as it stands currently. I can't see that being in top 10. I think in that order as well, City, United and then Leicester. I'm really happy to see Leicester in there, actually. I think Rodgers has done such a good job since he's come in there as well. They're a club with a nice mentality, and I think they still kind of have that high of the title win season where the city is behind that club as well. Like, I know that's where you're from, and I spent some time there, and it's nice to see kind of them get what they deserve after a really nice few seasons of playing good football as well. After Claude Puel came in, I think they were all looking for them to kick on, and it didn't work, and Rodgers has done well there. For fourth, I still think it's Chelsea's. I think it's interesting that none of us mentioned Spurs in the conversation, who currently sit fifth. Same points as West Ham, same points as Liverpool. But I mean, today proved they're just not consistent enough, Spurs, for me.
It is a consistency with them, isn't it? It seems like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So any kind of rhythm to get into that top four is just gone straight away. Like today, for example, was a perfect example of Spurs having a great opportunity to. I think they would have crept into fourth on goal, and just capitulated against the team they should have beaten when all said and done. Welcome back, John. Don't know if you heard any of what you were saying, but did you pick a top four, like a fourth place, Myles? What was your?
I think I would say Chelsea. I actually quite fancy Everton if they can stay consistent as well. I think Ancelotti is just such a well-seasoned manager, and he knows how to set a team up. I think their squad lacks the kind of quality in the last hurdle that Chelsea have. But with Chelsea being in Europe, who knows? West Ham are up and there, but I feel like they're an injury to Antonio away from completely dropping down. So I think Chelsea will just be like John said. Chelsea have been there, they've done that. I think they'll see it out. I can't see Liverpool catching them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm optimistic.
I think there's a few teams where I think if they did get into that sort of Champions League or even Europa League place, I would genuinely be worried about their prospects for the following season, just because of the amount of games and the amount of squad depth they haven't got. I think the Hammers are probably one of those teams. I don't think below the first 11 they've got a huge amount of quality. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think it's a similar story with Villa, because I know Villa are on the fringes of European places. John, you look poised to say something about West Ham then. Are you in agreement with what I just said?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's been a bit of investment over the last few years, as a lot of people and fans know. They splashed. For some reason, West Ham always need to spend more money to acquire a player. I don't know why that is, but it's been like that for a few years now. Or they're signing people on higher wages, that kind of thing. So, you are right. There's no real depth past the first 11, really. Lingard's been a good addition, which I didn't think he would do what he's done. I don't think anyone would really, for the form that he's hit and the assists and goals that he's got involved in. He's looked very, very fit, very healthy, obviously trained extremely well at Man United. So fair play to him. But at the end of the day, past the first 11, there isn't. I mean, look at the subs that they bring on. Even now, they're very. I don't really know any subs that would get into anyone else's first team, and that's what you've got to be looking at. You know, you look at most teams, in fairness, in the top 6 or 7, predominantly the last couple of years, you would take a player or two from a bench. Can't say that with West Ham, unfortunately.
Wow. Honest assessment there from a fan who probably recognises the team's punching above its weight a little bit to an extent. But, you know, that's fair play to David Moyes. He's actually worked pretty wonderful job there, hasn't he, in the time he's had.
Yeah, it's been superb.
I think the only thing he's missing is a decent transfer window to invest in some players that can add some depth to the squad. But we'll see. It's a funny time to be spending cash at the minute, isn't it? So I don't think many teams will have the means to do that. Yeah. So interesting one. I want to go back to the games again, if we can. I don't know how much you guys saw of Liverpool against Arsenal. What did you make of it, Myles? Because from what I could see, Arsenal were shambolic. They were absolutely horrendous. And I have no idea how Mikel Arteta is still in a job. Great. Thanks for that, John. Live update on the game. As a United fan, cheers. But back on track with Arsenal-Liverpool. Arsenal were shambolic. And they made life very easy for Liverpool. It's the kind of game I think Liverpool needed just to boost their goal difference, boost their confidence, and to get some kind of form back. What was your take, though, Myles?
Oh, you put me in a tough position here, you know. So, yeah, obviously, as I said last week, I'm a big Villa fan, but I have a vested interest in Arsenal these days. My missus and her entire family are all Arsenal fans. So I sat down to watch the game yesterday, hopeful that they do something, and honestly, it was the worst performance I've seen from them this season. They just lacked everything. They lacked intensity, they lacked a plan, they lacked shape. They couldn't string 3 passes together. Aubameyang, I love Aubameyang from his time at Dortmund. He was brilliant when he first joined Arsenal, and he proved his worth at the end of last season. I don't know what's happened to him this season, but he looked exhausted. I know, obviously, we've just had the international break where players will be travelling a lot more than they maybe would normally, but giving him the job of tracking Trent. If I was Trent yesterday, I would have had a field day with the ability that he's got to get forward. I think with the pressure that he's been under lately, he had the perfect opportunity yesterday. You had, obviously, Tierney go off injured, which is a shame because I think he's probably Arsenal's best player. And Aubameyang just did not want to move. So if you've got a forward and your left side that's meant to be your threat, and he isn't moving forward, well, that just pushes Trent further and further up the pitch, and that's where he's more comfortable, which is an odd thing for a right back maybe, but he just had so much space, and no one seemed to highlight that. They didn't make any changes. Martinelli came on far too late for me. I would have brought him on just to push Trent a bit further up the pitch. He's a bit more direct. Pepe was pretty much absent for the entire game, which is a shame because he'd hit some form recently. And I never thought I'd see an Arsenal team where I thought they actually missed Xhaka a bit, because I think Xhaka would have gone in and just put a challenge in at least. But they had no consistency yesterday. It was really sad. And Gabriel was their best player for most of the game, and then got massively caught out for one of the goals.
I was going to say best player stretch, but then the field of choice was not amazing because there's so many poor performances, so incohesive as a team, and I don't know how they're going to get back to the top 6, let alone the top 10. They're struggling. They're flagging. I will say we were talking a lot about Trent Alexander-Arnold last week, so you've got a point to make first. I know that, Miles, but if you could touch on Trent first, then perfect game for him to kind of show what he can do. But let's face it, he had quite an easy run of it, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't feel like we learned anything new about Trent yesterday. Personally, we know he can deliver a good cross. The question isn't that with him. It's, can he keep his consistency? Can he defend the channel well when he hasn't got Van Dijk backing him up? And what does he do under pressure right now? And all right, he's got the media pressure right now, but he had no pressure in the game. They just allowed him the freedom of the pitch, really. And that's great. That's exactly what Liverpool wanted. Because, to be honest, they offered very little. They controlled the play in the first half, but they didn't really create any chances until Jota came on. He's having a great season for them. By far their standout player to me, along with Salah, obviously. But until he came on, Arsenal were awful, and Liverpool just weren't exploiting it either. So I don't feel like we learned that much from yesterday's game. Are Liverpool back? No. Are Arsenal back? No. I don't think anyone thought they were before that game kicked off. So it was frustrating, but it felt like a wasted 90 minutes, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. I think I learned just how far behind Arsenal really are. I mean, I thought they were gaining some ground, but I think it was on Match of the Day. There was a breakdown of Arteta's first half of his games, and then the most recent half of games he's taken charge of. And he's actually been taking less points per game in the last half of his time with the club than the first half. So he's not moving any further forward. In fact, he's moving backwards. And that really is telling on a game like that. They should have, I mean, they could have really pressed Liverpool a lot harder and put some pressure on them. And they just didn't. They had nothing. And I don't even know if any of the players care anymore. They just look like they've given up.
It looked like that yesterday, didn't it?
And I think Arteta is probably the right guy to do something with them. But I don't think they've got the means to transfer in and out the players they need. There's far too many need to go. And they need far too many quality players to make up those positions. And I don't know if they can do that in 1, 2, 3, 4 transfer windows. And I also don't know if Arteta is the right guy to do that. It's a big ask. John, I've not asked your opinion yet. What did you make of the game? Did you see much of it? And did you learn anything from it?
Yeah, one of my close friends, who's also called John, funnily enough, he's a Liverpool supporter, even though he lives down south, and has been since he was a kid. So I remember back at the West Ham Liverpool FA Cup final many years ago. That's always something we kind of go back to as a moment of friendship. But yeah, I think it's the game was what I thought it would be, to be honest. I didn't see Arsenal doing a lot. They were quite lucky against West Ham with a couple of deflected goals to start with. So I think the 3-3 scoreline flattered them a little bit. They've had quite a few results in the season where they've nicked a goal that maybe they didn't really deserve to either get a draw or a win. So looking at that, I just think Arteta, as you touched on as well, he's not a seasoned manager yet. Yeah, he's worked under Pep, who's arguably one of the greatest managers ever for what he's done in European football, not just in the Premier League, but the Bundesliga and La Liga as well, winning multiple titles, Champions Leagues with different teams. Yes, you could argue his teams are fantastic, but he still had to manage them. Every manager has some sort of dip, and it's when they come out of it, that's when you see the real, like your Mourinho's, Guardiola, Ancelotti, for example, at Everton. That Everton had a dip early in the season, but they've come out of it. They've come out the other end, and they're starting to build a bit of momentum again. I just haven't really seen that next click into gear for Arsenal, where they want, a bit of hunger, a bit of desire. Like Myles said about having Xhaka on, at least he put a tackle in. Okay, he might get frustrated and get sent off, but at least he's going to put a foot in and show a bit of passion, play for the shirt, play for himself maybe, be a bit selfish. Aubameyang, Hollywood signing, fantastic first 18 months, really hit and miss. There was talk of a bit of unrest in his personal life, seems to have transpired onto the pitch for the last few months. So, the sign of a good manager is getting the people that are working for you, irrelevant of what you're doing, to do the job they need to do at the right times. And unfortunately, it's extremely disjointed. There's a lot of flair with the young players, but they're there because of the passion and the energy, and they've got something to prove. You take that away, and their team is very, very average. Very average.
Well, that's what I said yesterday.
I was going to say, with that in mind, Arsenal are 10th in the league. Do you think that is pretty much where they're at right now anyway? Does the league lie for them at the minute, or are they genuinely a mid-table team now?
West Ham are overperforming, let's be honest, because the teams around them haven't delivered what they should have done. And you can look at a lot of teams underneath Man City, to be honest, Liverpool being a prime example. Yes, they've been, horribly hit with a lot of injuries and, having a whole essentially first team wiped out for periods of the season is not ideal at all. But they've still adapted and reacted, and at least they're there or thereabouts, and they can still be in the Champions League, which isn't a bad season. But yeah, I just think, they are a mid-table team at the minute.
So, Myles, you've said Liverpool aren't back after that performance. What do they need to get back? How far are they away from being back? Is it just the injuries returning that's missing?
That's obviously a big thing. Fabinho going back into midfield yesterday looked much, much better for the whole shape of the team. I thought it was a really interesting setup yesterday. That Arsenal, you would have bet on Liverpool yesterday, really, with the way that Arsenal have been this season. But they set up with three quite defensive-minded midfielders yesterday, Liverpool. All right, Thiago likes to play a ball forward, but he's not one that's going to charge them down. And they just found it easy to mop things up. I think for Liverpool, it's just about getting as consistent as possible between now and the end of the season, and then reevaluating in the summer. Van Dijk will be back for next season, and they'll probably bring in another centre-back, I would imagine, of proper quality. Kabak's doing a job, but let's be honest, he's not what you'd want for a total defence. Neither is Phillips, I imagine. I can't imagine many Liverpool fans would disagree with me on that. So I think once Van Dijk and Gomez are back and they can reevaluate the squad, then we'll see. But then at the same time, I think you have to address the forward line. Mane, I don't know what's happened to Mane over the last few weeks, because I think he's been one of the best players in the Premier League over the last few years, and he seems like he's lost his shooting boots. Firmino is not a number 9 that inspires me, if I'm 100% honest, and they're relying on Salah, who could go at some point. They're all the same age, that front line, so you think, all right, it's good that Jota's there pushing them, but I think they just need to find that consistency again, and then we'll see something. But a win against Arsenal, who were hit with a few injuries yesterday. It's disappointing that Arsenal are relying on 2 19, 20-year-olds in Saka and Smith Rowe. When they're missing, they look completely anonymous. But I don't think that's the result that you go, this is our season back on track at the moment. Sadly, Villa beat Arsenal 3-0 this season at the Emirates. So I don't know, I'm not taking too much.
Let's not forget that Liverpool result as well.
Well, we'll see how next week goes, and then I'll mention it again.
Well, I remember when Liverpool were kind of at the worst of the dip, and people were talking about Jurgen Klopp potentially leaving. Has he had enough? This is reflection of the way he went to Dortmund as well. He went to extreme highs and then it all crashed, and that was the end of the journey for him. Is that a similar thing here, or is that going to change? Do you think Klopp's still going to be staying around for the long haul? John, I'll start with you.
I mean, with these sort of things, you can always eat your words. That's why I don't mind sort of setting my stall out a little bit. But I think Klopp will be there for the long term unless the board want to get rid of him for whatever reason, which I very much doubt. This season, because of the injuries, I think is a bit of an exceptional circumstance. You won't see it very often. But as you start getting the players back, you look at yesterday, like Myles already mentioned, with Fabinho fitting back into midfield, doing the job that's needed to be done, a bit more space opens up, especially with Firmino up front as well. He's not a prolific goal scorer, never has been, but the team around him then have a lot more space, a lot more freedom, and maybe that's what they need. So you get a couple of players back, the space opens up, they're going to be scoring 3-4 goals comfortably every week. Yes, they will concede goals, of course, but give it the next few games, and I know that that's now going to be like we're looking at 34 games rather than 30. But I think the next 4 games will be a really, really big call for this Liverpool team, and if Jurgen Klopp does stay or not. But I do believe that he'll be there for at least the next few years, unless something crazy happens.
I must admit, when Jurgen Klopp was appointed, as a Man United fan, I kind of knew that was a turning point for them, because he had so many qualities that just fit. And I think we've talked about this in the past. When a player in a club just fits, it works. And I think Klopp is an example of a manager and a team just working together and being the right fit personality-wise. And if Liverpool were to ever get rid of him, that would be fantastic for the rest of the Premier League. It'd be a big loss for the Premier League, don't get me wrong. But I think he is the best thing about Liverpool at the moment. I think if Klopp goes, the whole house of cards just comes falling down.
Yeah.
Having said that, we've seen how much Virgil van Dijk's been missed as well. So they definitely need some steel as backup centre-backs. They know that now. But there's talk of them signing players like Kylian and Mbappe. Are they still got that kind of draw, or are they on the decline? Are they still kind of a top-level potential European Cup winning team that can attract the kind of calibre of Kylian Mbappe? And can they even afford a player like him? Can anybody afford a player like him at the minute?
That's where I think the sticking point is. I don't think that they've lost enough pedigree. Look, Klopp's got enough credit in the bank from his career, let alone his time at Liverpool. The Liverpool board will not get rid of Klopp anytime soon. It would be ridiculous to be honest. He could walk away at some point. We've seen it. He might get tired of the project and think he needs to start again. And if the talk is that maybe Hansi Flick will take the Germany job after the Euros, and then if the Bayern job comes available, who knows? There's a shootout then between Nagelsmann and Klopp and which one they want to really pursue, and it might tempt him. You never know. If I was a player of Mbappe's profile, would I want to move to a club like Liverpool at this time? I think it would depend on getting the security of what's coming in the future. If Klopp is staying, I think once the fans are back in the stadium and they're competing again, and Van Dijk's back, of course they're an exciting prospect. But I just can't see a way that anyone can afford Mbappe, really. The way that football's been over the last couple of years, I think it's a pipe dream to say that Liverpool would sign Mbappe. They'd have to sell one of Salah or Mane to be able to push that deal through. Do they want to do that? Will someone put the kind of money up for one of them if someone like Mbappe or Haaland was available? I can't see it, personally.
No, I think a Kylian Mbappe in Liverpool colours, for me, as a Man United fan, is quite a scary prospect because he would cause trouble, wouldn't it? Let's face it, with the players they've already got, it would be an immense signing. But it's a lot of money. There's a lot of transfers that could or couldn't happen, and I reckon that the amount of money clubs have got is going to have such a big say in this next summer transfer window. And I reckon you'll just see the divide between the top and the bottom getting even bigger, because anyone that gets Champions League revenue is obviously going to be reinvested in playing staff, and there'll be very few clubs that can afford the likes of Kylian Mbappe. And that will just create a bigger divide for me, which is really sad. It's a weird season we're going through, isn't it? Let's face it. Moving swiftly on, have we got any other games we want to talk about from the Premier League weekend? Anything stand out for you? Actually, no, there is one. I want to talk to you about Villa, Miles, because as a big Villa fan, what did you make of the performance today? What a turnaround for them. 3-1 winners in the end. Are they onto something this season? Are they going to finish in a European place?
I wish you'd asked me that a couple of months ago, and I would have said quite confidently yes. Today's performance was one that you kind of expect for most of the game. As soon as you looked at the lineup today and Jack wasn't in it, I worried immediately. Smith said yesterday that he was available, so we were all kind of hoping for that. That was false. I don't think it was a mind game. I think he's tweaked something in training yesterday and missed out. And it just shows we still look solid at the back for most of the game. Obviously, Mings has a little hiccup today and it costs us, but we just don't create anything without Jack in there. And you take the talisman out of any team and you'll see them suffer, but Jack's creating the most chances in the league for us by such a distance that Watkins ends up isolated. The only chance El Ghazi creates is just shooting from 40 yards whenever he gets the opportunity. And we looked really flat today. And I thought we were losing the game. Trezeguet, fair play to him. He's come on and he's worked hard, which is what he's always credited with. And it's paid off today. And I'm glad that we got the goals that we did. It's been a long time since we scored more than one goal in a game. It's the first time we've won a game from a losing position this season. But Fulham will hang their heads today and think we should have left with 3 points. It's not a performance that I looked at and was inspired by, but the important thing is getting the 3 points, especially this time of the season. And hopefully Grealish is back next week and we'll see something.
Is Jack Grealish that big a player for the team then? Is he that important to the way that Villa play that when he's not in the team, it just doesn't work quite as well?
It's really sad because you never want to be the team that's branded as the one-man team. You never want to be the Crystal Palace and Wolves Zaha. But let's be honest, it's been very apparent the last few weeks that that's how Villa look. it looked at the start of the season like we were building something around him, and that was the project that they've talked about for a long time. We've got American owners, who wanted to market Villa and push them a bit like an American franchise and have Grealish as their franchise star and their marquee player and build around him. And that was working. When he's in the team, he makes other players better. It's not just that he's so phenomenal when he plays, but Barkley has someone that he can link up with on a similar wavelength to him. Watkins' movement is really complementary of it. Target, come on, leaps and bounds since Grealish has been playing on the left-hand side. And with him gone, Villa have lost their focal point, and no one seems to know where to be anymore, because it seemed that when Grealish is there, they all fit in around that shape and it works. So when you've got someone so creative that dictates your attacking play, of course you're more engaged in the game. We don't have that right now. And it's not even just that, Villa are a one-man team, it's Jack Grealish, but it is, when you take him away, there isn't a like-for-like replacement that means that we can set up in the same way. He's not a bomb down the byline and see what he can do on the kind of winger. He's very much bring the ball in field, see where the gaps are, open space for your fullback. El Ghazi doesn't do that on the left. And he gets some goals every now and again, but it's such a drop-off that, we've really felt the pain of it.
It's strange when you've got a player like Jack Grealish as a focal point of your team. It's difficult to find anyone who you can have as backup to that kind of style of play. Do you see what I mean? Because Tottenham have a similar situation with Harry Kane, where he's such a quality player. If they were to replace him with somebody, it'd have to be a very similar caliber. But who's going to sit on the bench and be waiting for their chance when someone like Harry Kane's in front of them? Similar with Jack Grealish. I mean, if they were going to have a very similar player to what he does for Villa, they'd have to be a really top quality player, or someone with loads of potential, maybe. And that's difficult to buy, really, isn't it?
It should have been Barkley, really. I know, obviously, he's more of an orthodox number 10 rather than someone who might play on that left-hand side. But Grealish would say that's his position as well. I think when Jack went out of the team, that's what Villa fans would have hoped for. Barkley would step up. But obviously, he's had his injury as well. And since he's come back from that, his form's he's not been able to pick up match fitness. He's not looked on the ball. And that's a real shame. There was talk in January of Villa pursuing a permanent deal. And I think any Villa fan would have snapped your hand off. There would be more of a hesitation now. Like Jacob Ramsey's coming off the bench before him. He's just a young kid who's just breaking through. And Barker came to Villa to try and push for the Euros. And that's never happening now. He's so far down the pecking order. So, it is hard to cover for your best player. I think we're fortunate. The only reason I would argue that Villa aren't a one-man team this season is because I think the other player that's been phenomenal is Emi Martinez. I think without him, they're not worried about where we'd be in the league. So, I'm glad that we've got that solid base. We didn't have that last season until lockdown, and it really, really cost us. So even on games where we are kind of unsure and blunt up front, I can rely on the fact we probably aren't going to concede many either. Konsa and Mings have done well together, and Emi Martinez, honestly, watching Leno yesterday for Arsenal, if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be tearing my hair out. The way he approaches the game compared to Martinez, he's just not safe. And that's what you want him to do.
They made a similar mistake with Szczesny going to Juventus. And at the time, I thought that's going to really hurt them because he's going to be a quality player. He's Juventus number one, isn't he? So, I mean, that's a similar situation with Emi Martinez. I always thought he was being primed to be the number one Arsenal goalkeeper. Yet they stuck with Leno. Why is that? That's mad.
I like Leno, and I think Leno's had a good career and he does have some strengths. But I think this season has showed that maybe they could have probably got more money for Leno as well because of his pedigree. I think if he'd gone out over to Germany or gone abroad, maybe the offers weren't there and they needed the money, so Martinez was the easier asset to sell. But I mean, I've had many disputes with my partner's father, who's a big Arsenal fan, about whether they kept the right one or not. And I'll be interested to see him soon and see if he's still adamant that he's right. But I can't see it. I think Martinez is. Maybe I'm biased, but when the team of the season comes out at the end of the year, if Martinez isn't the goalkeeper, I'll be very surprised.
He's one of those players who's probably going to be like a club player of the season as well, or very close to the Villa player of the season, isn't he?
If Jack wasn't there, he would be.
Yeah, I mean, what a turnaround. I mean, he only came into the Arsenal first 11 as cover for Leno, didn't he, for injury? Yeah. But what a performance he had in his chance in Arsenal colours.
And a great character
really
too.
Let him go. Sorry?
A great character too. Anytime you see him talk or his social media or anything. He just seems like he's just genuinely really happy to be playing football. And he was a gentleman in the way he left Arsenal as well. Very complimentary of the club, really happy, but looking for a new opportunity. And the way he talked about, I think he was talking about how he promised his mother and father that he'd do something while he was at Arsenal. So winning the FA Cup and the Community Shield, like, just meant. I love seeing that. Yeah. And he's coming to Villa and he's shaped that back four with him. He's great.
He was in floods of tears, wasn't he? Was it after winning the FA Cup last season? And that's got to get any football fan seeing that kind of reaction. But it just shows the kind of guy he is, how much it means to him. He's waited for his chance for the Arsenal gloves to come along so patiently, and he took it really well. And Villa's gain is Arsenal's massive loss, definitely. So interesting one. I'll move on now from Premier League to Sergio Aguero. Actually, there's a few things I think we need to discuss about him, where he goes to next, what kind of legacy he leaves as a Man City player, and where he stands amongst the great Premier League strikers. He's undoubtedly up there, isn't he? So, John, do you want to wax lyrical about Sergio Aguero? What kind of legacy do you think he's going to leave?
The guy was an absolute monster. I mean, the goals that he scored, probably. If you look at the last 30 years or so the Premier League's been going, he would have scored one of, if not the most memorable goal to win the title in, what year was it, 2015, 2012? It was a long time ago now, at least it feels like it, against QPR. And those words will resonate with Premier League fans for a very long time. You look at him from a statistical point of view, I think he scored one goal more than Rooney did in the Premier League in 120 games, roughly, less.
Wow.
So if you put that in a bit of perspective, that's obviously mad. We're talking, 4 seasons worth of games less to score the same amount of goals. I appreciate the people around him. If you look at Rooney when he's playing for United, with Berbatov, you had Van Nistelrooy, that's sort of in the transition of Rooney starting, and many other quality players around him, Ronaldo, obviously. But at the same time, Aguero, his goals per game ratio is mad. I think he's one of, if not the top, I think he's in the top 3. I know we're going to go through that in a little bit, so I don't want to give too much away. But Aguero is a beast. I remember when he signed for Man City thinking, who is this guy? And then I think his first goal was from outside the box against Wigan, come on as a sub and smashed it in from about 30 yards. And I thought, well, maybe he's going to do something for the Premier League. And then just, ever since that goal, never looked back. Super, super striker.
Yeah. I think he's one player that I'm gobsmacked that has been let go or is being let go. And I know Man City...
He's got a bit of a poacher about him. He can score long ranges. Just all-round top-quality professional. Seems like a really nice guy as well. And as I've already mentioned, scored one of the most memorable goals the Premier League will probably ever see. Winning the title with the last kick of the game. You can't get any more dramatic than that, really. Where does he go?
Because I can't actually see you now. You've kind of frozen out a bit. But... Myles, I was going to say, what's your take on the Aguero legacy and why Man City letting him go?
I think for the thing, as a neutral looking at Aguero, obviously the project that City started got a lot of neutrals backs up, and it's very easy to look down on them, and rightfully so in many ways, and they still will. Aguero kind of shaped that project, though, didn't he? He seemed to become the marquee player, along with people like David Silva and company. If you look at the amount of strikers that have come in and out of City since they had money, the likes of Jovetic, Dzeko, Negredo, Aguero has just been consistent. And it's very hard as a neutral not to admire his talent. I think John's right, he seems very down to earth as well. He just seems like what he wants to do is play football and score goals. And the rate at which he's done that is mesmerising. I think that was the biggest turning point in City's dominance, getting that spine sorted. And Aguero was always the one to spearhead that. It's a shame to see him leave the Premier League if that's what happens, which I imagine will. I can't imagine him staying in the Premier League now.
No.
Do I think it's the right time for him to go? He's had a few injuries lately. He's not been scoring at quite the rate that he normally would over the last few years. He definitely still offers a lot. But this isn't the first time that City have looked at getting rid of him since Pep's been there. Pep had a time where he didn't think Aguero was going to be his number one striker anyway. I imagine it will force their hand in the market. I don't think Jesus is the answer to being the new Sergio Aguero. So I'm not sure whether I'd let him go or not now. It's hard. With a club legend, would you rather see him go out at this sort of point or just keep staying until really it gets inevitable that they're not good enough? Maybe he wants to go out while he's still got something to offer elsewhere.
Potentially. I just think it's I think it's strange that he's being let go on a free, first of all. At least kind of get a fee for him last season if you knew that he was going to be phased out. But also, I mean, how many players in the Premier League top 10 would sign, how many clubs rather, would sign Sergio Aguero on a free transfer if they could? I don't think he would go to any Premier League club now, like you said. I think he will go abroad. But I know Barcelona are kind of looking at him and going, you know what, he could offer something here. He's better than Martin Braithwaite, let's face it. So what an upgrade he'd be for so many clubs. And for Man City to go, yeah, he's disposable after the service he's given, I'm genuinely surprised. I just don't think he's a Pep Guardiola player, potentially. That's the only thing. I think he wants somebody to play better with the ball at his feet. He likes false nines rather than actual centre forwards. So maybe that's the kind of route he's going down. Maybe Raheem Sterling's going to get more of a role as a goal scorer for the team. Who knows? John, did you have anything else to add about Sergio Aguero and his legacy? Because we lost you for a bit briefly.
No, I mean, like I sort of said, just to reiterate, the guy's an absolute legend for the Premier League. He'll be mentioned up there with Henry, Shearer, Van Nistelrooy, Van Persie, Rooney, like the whole lot. I mean, I think his goals per game ratio, depending on sort of what happens the rest of the season, is actually the top. He's 108 minutes per goal in the Premier League, which is ridiculous. I mean, bearing in mind it's regarded as the best league in the world for quality and physicality, etc. And to deliver that rate where you know that if you play him for just over a game, he's going to score you a goal, that is crazy. Yes, I agree with you as well with a fee. Probably could have gone somewhere easily for £10 million. See out his twilight years somewhere. But maybe he will go to Barcelona or something like Atletico, like Suarez, a bit of a shrewd signing for someone, Juventus maybe. Who knows? But I still think he can deliver, even if it's from the bench at the top level, as long as he stays relatively injury-free and that's managed correctly for the next few years, no doubt.
Well, I just look at some of the top European clubs or those in the sort of top four in their league, and you see the likes of AC Milan signing Mandzukic and Zlatan, and United going for Cavani. And, you know, these kind of players in the 30-plus twilight years, as you call them, are actually so experienced in scoring goals. And they are still scoring goals. And I think Aguero will continue to score goals right into his late 30s if he continues playing. So, you know, he's got a big choice ahead of him. I hope he does go outside the Premier League. It'll be difficult to see him in other colours. I think it'd be difficult for Man City and his legacy with the club to see him in other colours. So, yeah, I think Barcelona will be a good fit. And might be the kind of player looking to sort of support Messi because their attacking options aren't as good as they were. So how do you feel about Aguero in Barcelona colours, Myles? Does that sit with you?
I think it would make sense in many ways. There's a lot of talk that Barca and Real have both got financial difficulties right now. So bringing someone in of that kind of pedigree on a free would probably make sense. He's obviously already got a relationship with Messi from international level. I saw talk of him going back to Atletico as well. I'd be wary of that, adding another striker that's probably slightly past his best at a certain age. When they've already got Suarez, when they demand quite a lot of wages, would be an odd choice. The one that I saw first link was him going out and playing at Inter Miami, and I think that would be a shame to see him go there already. But I do think he's had some injury problems. He has lost a touch of pace, which was devastating at times. So a slight drop off wouldn't be a massive shock, to be honest. I think Serie A would be a great location for him. I think the kind of pace of Serie A and the way that these goal scorers are working in Serie A right now. I mean, you look at the numbers that Lukaku and Ibrahimovic are producing, when really they don't rely just on pace. It's more about the quality of their positioning, how they can finish. Aguero could be a great addition there. I'm not really sure who, though, because like I say, AC Milan have already got Ibra for another year, and maybe they'd want to replace him. Inter have got Lukaku. I can't see him going anywhere anytime soon. And Juventus, how many more forwards can they sign? sign, really.
Especially 30-plus forwards as well, however legendary they are in the game,
Yeah.
Okay,
sure
so with that in mind then, we've been talking about making lists of where he fits, and I've seen Wayne Rooney's comment on where he fits in the top 5 Premier League strikers of all time, and he's put Thierry Henry at the top, which I think is a fair shout. But John, what would you say is your top 5 in order from the top down?
All right, so I've always been a bit of a stat man, as you know, and I do like my numbers. So rather than go on pure thought and things that I've witnessed over the years with Shearer and Henry, etc., and the goals and the sheer outrageous goals some of them have scored, I've gone purely on goals per game ratio. So there is some data behind it to back up my thought process.
Oh man, come on, you can't do that. Where's the passion in doing that? I just want to know which players got you up off your seat and excited.
It would be too easy to fall into the trap of just mentioning like Shearer and Henry, etc. So I wanted to get some data behind it because I think that's fair. I appreciate playing at different times. You could argue the Premiership's got harder. So, funny enough, Aguero is actually number 1 for goals per game ratio. Okay. You've got Harry Kane. He's still active at the minute, and he scored another brace today. So, as of writing, he had 125 goals, which was 121 minutes per goal, which is still really, really strong. A game and 30 minutes. Henry is there in third, still super, super high up. And his ratio is, literally the same as what Harry Kane is at the minute. They're identical, in fact. So that'll be interesting to see what Harry Kane delivers over the next few years, if he can keep up his consistency. Does he stay in the Premier League with Spurs? Do they become a bit more of a powerhouse? Are they going to be really inconsistent? So that, we'll have to wait and see how that obviously plays out. Salah's a bit of a contentious one because would you argue he's a true centre-forward? Probably not. But he has played up front, obviously. So if you would like to strike him for the record, I can see Myles shaking his head. However, his goals per game ratio is ridiculous. Again, 126 minutes per goal for someone that isn't actually predominantly a striker. And you could argue Henry wasn't at the start as well. He played on the wing and then moved to centre forward. So if you want to have that debate, then I know it isn't quite the same, of course, but you could still argue that it's relative. And then Van Nistelrooy, 128 minutes per goal. Again, these guys have played well over 50 games. We're talking more like 75 plus. So there's a good bit of data, a few seasons behind it, not just someone like Cantona, for example, that didn't actually play that many games, but scored many, many iconic goals and sits in the memory for other reasons as well, obviously. But yeah, that's what I've gone with. So I wanted something to back it up rather than just, I think, because I like the way they score goals or whatever.
Boring.
I was going to say that's not what football's about, mate.
This is the way it should be, like spark a bit of debate. If you feel that's boring, that's fine. However, I do believe that there's still some really, really strong forwards in there. And some of them are still active now. So be interesting if we could have a similar conversation in 5 years when some of these guys are retired and see if they're still up there or not. Or, Shearer is actually in the top 10. He is 10th out of the guys on the list. And scored an outrageous amount of goals and obviously spent his entire career in one league. So if someone like Harry Kane can do the same kind of thing and actually have a bit more of a legacy for the next 5 or 6 years, who knows? I'm sure he'll drop down because it's not going to be, or he won't be in his prime of his career and banging in goals left, right and centre. He will slow down a bit, but he's never had a lot of pace. It's always been touch and finish. So I'm interested to see how things go over the next few years, but as it stands, I just wanted to have a little bit of boring data to spam it with, and then you guys can go on your thoughts and feelings and Hollywood goals against United like Henry or Van Persie, for example, another absolute superstar. Rooney, didn't even mention him. The guys, some of the goals he scored, the overhead kick against City was, me and my mate stood up and were like, I won't repeat what was said when the goal went in, but yeah, there's been some fantastic moments for some quality players, but I wanted to use a bit of data rather than just, how I think and feel, which is what you guys can do,
What if I can press you to make a top number 1 foreign Premier League striker? Who would you choose? On thoughts and feelings rather than data.
Oh, me personally?
Yeah.
It'd have to be Henry, I think. The guy is just an absolute monster. The pace, the fact that he was never actually a centre forward and come in from the wing and essentially change position is ridiculous. And some of the goals he scored, I never really liked him. He was too arrogant for me growing up. I always liked the hard working players, people who got really fired up and stuck in, like Rooney's volley against Newcastle, I think it was, when he's arguing with the ref, he just runs up and just smashes it in. I love that. Whereas Henry would be always a bit more sort of like, I'd never really liked that personally, but the guy is an animal. The amount of goals he scored, and very, very good goals, and his footballing brain, the back heels. I think there's one against Watford in the Invincible season where it was surrounded by 3 players and just backheeled it in. You're like, what? How is that even possible? He nutmegged someone doing it as well. Just think the audacity to even try it. Superb, So, although Arsenal can do one, Henry is a superstar.
See, that's what I wanted to see. I didn't want to hear data. I want to see you get fired up and passionate about a player that really got your sort of pulse racing. So thanks, John. Yeah, you've got it in the end.
You've got a bit of both.
So you're saying Thierry Henry. Miles, have you got a breakdown of top 5? I want to stick to foreign strikers, really, if we can, because there are so many quality English ones that are probably going to screen bias if we bring them into it as well. So if we stick to foreign strikers, Miles, what's your top 5? Have you got a top 5?
I'm glad you said that because that's what I was prepared for. No, I'm surprised John didn't say Di Canio, to be honest. So I went Henry as well as number 1. Growing up, he was the kind of player that you just watched and thought, if I could be any Premier League player, that's who I'd want to be. He was just exciting. He had that touch of pace. Henry is one of those players where I feel like if he played in 2021, he'd almost even be better. The game is evolving to people trying to be more like Henry was then, in a weird way. When Martial, for example, signed for United, it was, he's the next Henry, he's going to be the next. He wasn't, but you can see that that's the mold people are trying to create. So yeah, Henry for me was just unbelievable to watch. You knew that he was going to produce some magic. He was always going to entertain, and he had moments that will always stick in your mind. I think even about when he came back to Arsenal, when he had that little loan spell from Red Bulls, and he scored that goal. I think it was against Leeds. Yeah. I'm not an Arsenal fan at all. Couldn't stand him at that point, to be honest. But I was so happy for him because it's just that's what you want from a Premier League great.
I'll be honest, that moment you're talking about when he returned and he scored that goal, I think it was the League Cup. It wasn't like a major game. But that's honestly one of the moments as a football fan where it choked me a little bit to see him score, because you knew, as an Arsenal fan watching that, would mean so much. And as an Arsenal fan, as a player as well, really, wasn't he? He returned to the club, apparently past his best, and he does something like that. It's a beautiful moment, really, wasn't it? So anyway, sorry to interrupt. Where were we?
My connection dropped a little bit. Sorry, my connection dropped a little bit anyway, so it was quite a good timing that you chimed in.
That's all right. I'll just fill for you, Miles. I was just eulogising about Henry and how he returned to the club.
It was Henry at number 1, and then Aguero number 2.
Okay.
I'm hoping you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah, it's a bit broken, but carry on.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I had a bit of connection issue there, I think.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just you're a bit blurred now, but just carry on, mate. It's fine.
I'll go. So yeah, number 2 was Aguero for me. I think the longevity of his consistency at this level as well is incredible. I mean, we've already thrown a load of superlatives at him. He's a phenomenal footballer, great touch of pace, incredible football intelligence. The thing with Aguero that I always really admired was he seemed to be able to finish from any angle. He could be stood almost in line with the goal line, and he'd find a way of putting it in the top corner. And I always thought he just got that killer instinct. So he was my second choice. And then from there it's harder. I had Van Persie next. Another one who just, for moments, I've not seen someone make my jaw drop like that with Van Persie. His ability to volley a football is incredible. Volleying a ball is a hard skill, really, when you break it down. And I think about the one against Charlton for Arsenal, and sadly the one against Villa for Man United, where Rooney plays that ball from 40 yards across the pitch, and he just watches it the whole time, bang.
Yeah.
And he was very classy, a bit like Henry in that sense, that everything he did was just classy. It just seemed like watching him was almost like orchestra. It was just, everything was just elegant. I loved Van Persie for that. I thought he was phenomenal. And his goal scoring record is, I'm sure John will back me up, probably puts him about third, right? After that, Drogba for me. Another one who kind of revolutionised the club that he was at in that mould. Chelsea broke through with all that money, and they had Kesman, Adrian Mutu, Shevchenko. None of it worked, but Drogba was just Mr. Chelsea for years. He was very much the embodiment of what Mourinho wanted. He fought, he was strong, he was quick, he was direct, and he scored all kinds of goals really as well. And it was just always, he had that attitude of, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to win. I'm going to make this club mine. I'm going to be Chelsea's leading man. And it was nice to see someone jump on a project and actually do that with them. I think Drogba, for his influence alone, it has got to be up there. The fifth one is the hardest one to pick when you break it down to that. So in my head, I went over Van Nistelrooy, Dwight York, considered Suarez slightly. I don't consider Salah because I don't think he's an out striker. But his goal scoring record is also Salah. I'm going to say Salah is the best, worst footballer I've ever seen. His technique is so weird to watch. Nothing he does is flattering. It looks like he just swings at it and it works for some reason. It drives me mad. That's another one. I think for me, it's Van Nistelrooy. For the type of striker he was as well. Just he was a number 9. I think he scored 1 goal outside the box in all of his Premier League goals. Like that says a lot about the. I
don't think he did it? Well, isn't that a random stat that he didn't score ever outside the box? Maybe he scored 1, but I thought it was 0.
Maybe, but it just, regardless, the kind of poacher attitude, you don't see much of that anymore. And I really like that he was just a very archetypal number 9 striker. The other one that I oddly considered, and if he comes back at some point, I'd be interested to, and I don't think he gets enough credit, is Lukaku. If you look at Lukaku's goal scoring record, it's incredible. I think he's got 115 Premier League goals. That's more than Drogba. That's more than Van Nistelrooy. But because he was at Man United in a very odd time, and he was kind of attributed as having that bad donkey-like first touch for a long time, people didn't really ever give him the look in. But he scored goals at West Brom, Everton and United. And looking at what he's doing at Inter now, I'd be really interested to see him come back to the Premier League and whether he'd do it again. But my top 5 was Henry, Aguero, Van Nistelrooy, Drogba, and Van Persie. But I got the Vans the wrong way around.
I'll go through mine because I think mine's very similar to that, Miles, probably just in a different order. So number 1 is definitely Henry. I think he was a terrifying player to play against from anyone who actually was up against him. And he scored so many different types of goals, so prolifically as well. He was just a joy to watch. Second, I've got Aguero as well, so I think I agree with you there. Again, I won't eulogise any more on him, but just a difficult player to defend against. I think it was Rio Ferdinand said that he's just so awkward because his centre of gravity is really low, but he's really stocky and muscular. But you just can't get him off the ball. He's so difficult to defend against. So Aguero number 2. Didier Drogba, I've got number 3. I think without him, the golden years under Jose Mourinho just wouldn't have happened. He was one of the main driving forces behind that team just working really, really well together. And again, as an opposition fan, so much respect for Didier Drogba. One of those players who you would happily take on your team because he was just so effective at what he did. I think he cost about £24 million as well, which is, in any money, in any time, in any era, is a bargain, really. So great signing. I've got Robin Van Nistelrooy, Van Persie number 4, and Ruud Van Nistelrooy number 5. I just love watching Van Persie as a Man United fan and as him as a Man United player. Again, the kind of goals he scored were just blockbuster. Get up off your seat and just jaw drop into the floor watching him. And he did it for Arsenal too. And the fact that he did that consistently for 2 quality Premier League teams kind of earmarks him as one of the best, really, for me. So, similar top 5 to you, Miles. And, some absolute quality players there. Last one I want to touch on before we go is just the subject of Erling Haaland being on the move. I don't know if you see much about this story, but this is one of those stories about modern football that absolutely boils my blood because he's contracted to Dortmund. They've been very, very good to him. His agent is Mino Raiola, who is the best, apparently, at what he does. But what he does is get the maximum fee and the maximum deal for his players by just tarting them all over the continent. And the disrespect for me that shows to Borussia Dortmund, who've been so good to him, is ridiculous. I mean, I had high hopes for Erling Haaland being one of those players that you just looked at as being like a generational talent. But when his agent's doing things like that, like he did for Paul Pogba as well, saying things for him on his behalf to the media, it infuriates me, and it really ruins the legacy of a player who should really be one of the greatest up-and-coming players of his generation. And he will go to a massive club and they'll pay stupid money for him. But for me, it just really kills the spirit of the game and makes him look like a bit of an idiot, really, to be fair. Where do you think he'll end up, John? Have you seen much about the Erling Haaland story? Have you seen him in action very much? What kind of player do you think he would sort of become in a big team? And which kind of big team can you see him contributing to?
Yeah, so I think he would fit into pretty much any team. The guy's like superhuman. He's 20 years old. He's bigger than like most people. Like, look at Lukaku, very, very strong centre forward. Ronaldo, super fit. It's like they basically mashed him together, and those two have had a kid. I just don't get where he's kind of come from. Left-footed as well, which a lot of people don't realise. He's very good with his right, but left-footed as well. Yeah, modern football can be a bit of a shame in instances like this. He will just go to the team that can afford him, which I think is a bit unfortunate, because he's going to go somewhere that maybe the desire for him personally isn't there. So you mentioned the Pogba deal, him going back to United. Did he, in his heart of hearts, really want to go back? Probably not. It's just somewhere that could afford him. He knew a little bit about the club, obviously, the history, what would have been expected of him. And don't get me wrong, it's not been a failure, but it's not been as good as it could have been. I want to see players go to a team, like I was saying earlier about sort of passion and the Rooney goal against Newcastle. You want to see people getting really fired up for games, really fired up for their team, having the camaraderie, playing under a manager they want to play for, all of that sort of stuff. If you're getting palmed around to 7 different clubs, I mean, you might as well toss a coin. You're not going to have the DNA instilled in you to really, really go for it. So, yeah, that's a bit of people call it sort of the modern day football cancer, where it just deals like that shouldn't be done in this manner. And you've got to agree to, I know it's a bit of a sort of harsh wording, but you've got to agree to a greater or lesser extent that, does it really need to be in the game? No. Is it about money? Yeah. And unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen. He will go to one of the biggest clubs in the world, whether that's Barcelona, Madrid, or PSG, one of the, Juve, potentially. I doubt it, though. City, United. I mean, who can afford him? That's the thing. I know his buyout clause was about sort of 66 million, I think, from memory, which isn't mega money, but it's going to be wanting to get paid Messi money, like £1 million a week. So what team's going to be paying that? There's only a very, very select few, unfortunately, that can pay it. So I hope that he goes somewhere, it fits, and he absolutely smashes it, wins the Ballon d'Or multiple times, and really doesn't get injured, and just becomes this new, like Messi or Ronaldo, is someone we can look at and be like, this guy is an absolute animal and well played, and everyone just plaudits alike, critics, fair play. Whatever he does, that's what I want to see. I don't want him to go somewhere and it just ends up being a disaster, because that'll be a shame for football, I think.
I think so. I think he's a lot of potential, but he's fulfilling it in real time. And I think he's been brilliant for Dortmund, and Dortmund have been brilliant for him. And it's the disrespect is shown to them, really, that really annoys me the most, because they're a great club and they're just being walked all over. It's not the first time Dortmund have been walked all over by a player. I remember Ilkay Gundogan as well did similar when his contract was running down to force a move. And I just thought that was disgusting at the time as well. But Erling Haaland had an opportunity for me to put himself on a high level, not just for the football that he played, just the way he conducted himself. And I think he's undoing that as we speak, really. We're seeing him become a mercenary like Neymar was. And again, Neymar's another player who could have been an all-time great, but his legacy is tarnished by the fact that he moved to PSG for one reason and one reason alone, that's money. So really, really sad. And I think Haaland's probably going to be going down that same route. I pray that Mbappe doesn't, because I think he seems like a lad who's got his head on his shoulders. So I think if Mbappe was to move, it'd be to a club that fit him and the way he played. Fingers crossed. But again, modern football, we don't know. But yeah, just to finish, Myles, how do you feel about the Haaland situation? You have always been quite a big fan of Borussia Dortmund. and they've always been a club that's quite close to your heart, haven't they? So I mean, you must have an opinion on this that's quite strong as well.
I looked at the story of Raiola taking him around. What's the point in that, really? Are you a big club in world football? Yes. Would you like Haaland right now? Of course. So it's only about money, which is a shame. I'll be honest, I don't think he will leave this summer. So the buyout clause that John was talking about, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly confident that kicks into place next summer. And I think it's 72 million. So in a post-pandemic world, can a club really justify probably paying over 100 million this summer when they could pay 72 a year later? And it's not like you'd be getting him after his prime. He'll still only be 22, I think, at that point. I think he'll probably have one more year at Dortmund. I think they're far more likely to sell Sancho this summer. And knowing Dortmund's model, Dortmund aren't mugs. They'll be gutted to lose Haaland, of course they will, but they'll move on to the next one. They'll bring another young talent in, farm them, make them a star, and sell them for big money. They did it with Dembele, and they'll do it again. So I don't think Dortmund will be gutted about it. They would probably, in many ways, rather sell this year to get more money. But I think they're not going to let him and Sancho go in the same summer. And I think Sancho is more likely to go. I think Haaland, where will he end up? Man City makes sense with Aguero going. And his dad obviously has history there. So maybe there is a connection there. There's the romantic in me that thinks, wouldn't it be nice to see maybe Haaland go to Barcelona and Mbappe go to Real Madrid and we get the Ronaldo Messi generation 2 going? That would be interesting, of course. But I think there's probably another year in Haaland at Dortmund. I could be made to look very silly in the summer, but I think Sancho will be the first to go.
See, I think with the financial commitments that clubs are hoping to make in the transfer market, Dortmund will want to sell high. I reckon Haaland's probably their most valuable asset ahead of Sancho. I think Sancho is probably more willing to stay another year than Haaland is. I think Haaland is that kind of player, unfortunately. His true colours have kind of been shown this summer with his agent gallivanting around Europe saying, right, where should we go then, mate? Should we go to Man City? Should we go to Barcelona? I think he's been on like a tour of all these big European clubs, his agent has. So his intentions are clear. I don't think he'll stay beyond this summer.
But is it him? I think
he's letting his agent do it.
Well, look at that, though. With Pogba is a perfect example. Mino Raiola has come out and said Pogba doesn't want to be at Man United. And then a week later, Pogba goes, I've never said that. That's my agent talking to get more money. I actually think it's in Mino Raiola's best interest to wait another year. If you can get Haaland for 72 million in a year's time, then your agent's fee can be higher. His wages can be higher. So I think it would be in his interest to stay for another year. I don't think now is the time to move. And I don't think Haaland necessarily is making noises that he's bored at Dortmund. I think they've had a poor league campaign for what they would have hoped for. So it is relying on how well they can do in the Champions League. If they do well in that, I mean, they've got City now, so who knows? But then why would you leave if you're Haaland? You're 20. That move will still be there next year. Will still be there the year after. But if you can just keep
so many milestones, isn't he? He's hitting so many milestones so quickly that he can see a path developing in front of him where he could play at the very highest level very quickly. Let's face it, he could go now. There's clubs that want him. If it's all down to him whether he's willing to go. I think he is. I think his ambition is so driven to be best he can that Dortmund just is too small for him now, and I think he feels that way. Even though it would be in everybody's best interest to stay on for another year, I really don't think he will, and that's just a sad state of affairs, really. But hey, that's modern football. I'd hate to end on a note like that, but we've got to leave it there, guys. But thanks for your time today. Thank you for anyone who's watching, and we'll be back again same time next week at 7:30 on Sunday. So for now, thanks, guys, and we'll speak soon. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye, everyone.